This is the leftovers from yesterday.
The biscuits are very good.
So just to show you how useful Chassidus is, I'm sure this is the only time this has ever happened. Last night I went to take my son from, he went to a Sudas mitzvah for Rav Ovadia. Friends.
Which son?
My older son.
And what does he have to do with
His friends are like that.
what's it called?
They find reasons for meals. It wasn't in Arnov. It was in Gedera. Not interesting.
Chova Kablan.
So I got there. I just came to pick him up. So the father of the family that was hosting the Suda comes out to the car, and he literally stops me from driving. He says, "Put the car aside." Wouldn't let me leave.
Wow.
Come inside, and you have to say something.
Okay.
So I said, "Okay, I'll get back at you. You won't let me leave. You'll be wishing for me to leave." So I spoke for 30 minutes. I chazered the whole mimer again. How did I connect it to Rav Ovadia?
Yeah.
It's very easy. That he hasn't said this yet, but we'll get to it maybe today. That the whole process here is really based on meditating on how agriculture works, on how a chaklai, how a farmer works.
Okay. Noach was the prototype of
Right. So Noach was, at least in Noach's time, they started farming.
Right.
That's considered to be the beginning of cultivated.
He made the instruments.
Okay, and he made the instruments. But a person who learns Torah is like a farmer. In the Zohar, the Mamish called Mechatzedei Chakla.
Yitzchak planted 100. He expected to get 1,000.
That's very good.
And he got 1,000 times more.
It's a very interesting note. Mechatzedei Chakla is like Notrikon of Yitzchak. And Cheshvan is Yitzchak. Not Cheshvan itself. Rather the pasuk that the Arizal brings. We learned the Maimer. It's Dvash Hayom Hazeh Hashem. So Dvash Hayom Hazeh Hashem is equal to 416, which is 2 times Yitzchak.
Okay.
So Yitzchak is very connected to Cheshvan also. So it's very interesting what you just said.
And the
So-
wells and the water.
And the wells, and he was a farmer. And amongst the Avos, it's very important. And Avram,
He was the only one.
he was the only one. Right? The Avos were all shepherds, and he was a farmer. So it's very, very interesting in and of itself, and that's why he's related to Cain. He's the side of Din. He's not the side of Hevel. The whole point was that a farmer to people who don't relate is very strange, because it's a guy who just goes and plows plows the land again and again and again every year, all the time.
Right.
And it's boring out of your mind. Like today they have machines that do this. Why would a person want to do this?
Well, it's great fun watching things grow.
Watching them grow maybe, but the tilling the soil is very it's very arduous and just repetitive. And the whole idea of this mimer and the way it's built in the Zohar and in Kabbalah is that when you're learning Torah, you're like a farmer. So you have to be willing to put in the hours, the many, many hours of just repetitive plowing. And the charisha, like lacharosh, in Hebrew today is a synonym for learning repetitively.
Yeah.
They used to call it shoneh, to learn, but
Yeah.
but today in modern Hebrew it's called lachosh. It's mamish that. And Rav Ovadia was like that. I once heard from him himself. I heard him say it, that he learned the Shas 23 times before he started learning it. He says, he smiled. He said, "What do I mean? I mean that I first wanted to have the language of the Shas on my like I wanted to get used to it." So he went through Shas 23 times before he started actually learning. That takes a lot of stamina. So anyway, we're getting there. We're getting there with this. So I talked about that for a while, and they really enjoyed it, because it's where my son goes is a yeshiva that they do a lot of repetitions. They're very good at it. So I told them, look, you're like farmers. People look at you and say, don't you get bored repeating the same thing again and again and again? But look at the produce I bring. And we talked about the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef was like that with Mishnah. The Garzan used to say, the Garzan just passed away, he used to say that a Mishnah he used to, Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, So he used to say that when I learn a Mishnah, I learn it 300 times. Again and again and again, 300 times. Why? Because I want it to click like that whenever I see a word from the Mishnah to throw me back into that Mishnah, wherever I see it. And the Beis Yosef was like that with Mishnah. He wasn't like that with other things, but he was like that with Mishnah, and that's why he got the Magid, the Mishnah that spoke in him. So that's the produce. Then we talked about why it's also called an apple orchard. That the Torah is also called an apple orchard.
Gan Eden.
That's when the Zohar says that the Gan Eden was an apple orchard. What it's really saying is that Gan Eden, meaning Malchus, is an apple orchard. We'll go over these today, hopefully today. Okay. So where were we? We came to the end of the atmosphere. So the atmosphere, as he said, it starts out of getting cooler as you go up, and then when you finish the stratosphere and you get to the troposphere, what we call that today, then it starts warming up again. It says the same thing exists in spirituality, meaning that the higher up you are, the more revelation of Hashem there is. There's more heat there. And as you come down, it starts cooling down, and then it starts warming up again as you reach the ground. And the reason that it warms up when you reach the ground is what he's going to talk about as tshuva. The reason that the ground is able to be warm is because it reflects the light back. And that's what we talked about last week.
Why does reflecting the light back make the ground warm?
Oh, so we said it's like the swimmer. Then when he gets to the end of the pool, he pushes off, he kicks, and that kick is the reflection, and it adds energy into the. So there's more energy going on or being transferred and causing heat transfer when you reach the end of the pool. If somebody would actually measure it, so you'd see that the pool is always coolest in the middle, and it's warmest at the end. So there's a lot of reasons for it. It has got nothing to do with the kick that swimmers do. But if you could measure the exact reason for why it's warmer at the edges, you would find that it has a tiny fraction that has to do with the kicks. There's more energy there. Okay, v'ainyan. Okay, so you see where we are? V'ainyan. Ki ananim. Somewhere here. Okay, v'ainyan. Okay, now the whole reason for this, why, like we said, why you brought this whole thing about the atmosphere, about being hot above, cooler in the middle, and then warm again at the bottom, is because he wants to talk about clouds, which is the real topic of the rainbow. And hopefully from this mimer you'll also understand why we don't look at the rainbow. It'll become very, very clear why we don't look at it. Amen. Ki ananim hu koach sheyeh tshuva. The clouds, like we said, mentioned this a few times already. Here he says it's the potential for tshuva. It's not exactly that the cloud is the potential. The cloud is the result.
The cloud is like a bank, where you save up all the money and you release it.
Okay. So the clouds are the result of tshuva. Tichtiv kemare hakeshet beyom ha'anan, ken mare dmut kvod Hashem. So Hashem, when He appears in the world, He's like the rainbow in the cloud. And it can only happen on a cloudy day. It can't happen without. So first of all, now you understand why we don't look at the rainbow. Because it's Kimare Kvod Hashem. It's like the vision of godliness. And since we don't look at godliness, so there's a custom by certain people, not to look at the rainbow. Because the rainbow, in a sense, represents the penetration of godliness into reality.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with bringing
It's like that we don't look at you guys when you make a bracha. It's not because we don't look at you.
Fingertips.
Okay? Because of the Shekhinah. So Hashem is revealing Himself, so you don't look. And how does He reveal Himself? It's Kemareh Akeshet B'yom Me'anan, like the vision of the rainbow on a cloudy day. Why is it on a cloudy day? V'nimshach, there's a mistake here, the bet is a mistake. V'nimshach al yedei b'chinat shemesh. So really, this happens from the rainbow because the rainbow itself is just sunlight. But we know that sunlight itself we can't look at.
It's too bright.
Too bright. So there's no worry. So really, sunlight has always been a good metaphor for Hashem, that you can't look at Him. So that in and of itself, that nobody's worried about, that somebody will look at it, because if they'll look at it, they won't look at anything anymore. So that's fine. But the problem is that when the sunlight goes through a cloud, it becomes a rainbow, so then you can look at it. So it is sunlight, and it's pretty direct sunlight, in fact. We know that the rainbow is just, from Newton and on, but they always knew this. Is a breakup it's like a prismic breakup of the sunlight that contains all the wavelengths. Ki hinei shemesh u'magen havaya elokim, like we learned last week. Kmo hamagen shemchaser mastir al hashemesh, kmo chen shem elokim mastir ma'alim al shem havaya. Just as the sheath, or the guard, or I don't know what to call it, protects or conceals the sunlight, so that it doesn't burn us. That it's not too today we would say, we talked about this 2 years ago, I think, that the sheath today is like, we understand, is like the magnetic field of the earth. It's very interesting that they used to understand it, that the sheath was on the sun itself. We understand it today that it's the earth protecting itself. In any case, without getting into the science of it. So there's a shield. And just as there's a shield to cover up the sun so that it's not too bright for humanity, for life on earth. So we need the name Elokim, nature, or just Elokim itself, to cover up and protect us from the name Havaya, which is too bright for a human being. כמו שכל השפעות גשמיות שנמשך מהשמש ממגד תבואות שמש, וכמו כן למעלה תבואות נקרא מלאכים. הכל הוא רק מאור השמש. ובהשמש עצמו אין מזה שום שינוי. Here he gets in one word, he got into a huge topic that he doesn't develop here, but the Tzemach Tzedek develops it in the Orator. Maybe we'll have time tomorrow to look at it. But he says, just as the sun causes things to grow, and it's called Tvuot Shamesh, the produce of the sun. The sunlight causes things to grow. We call it photosynthesis today. But it doesn't change anything in the sun. What's the growth, by the way, called? Malachi. Malach. It's called an angel. We talked about this when we talked about that there's an angel that hits something to make it grow. So here it's much more than that. Here he's getting into the whole topic that it's not just that an angel is hitting or energizing the growth. It's that what grows out of the sunlight is an angel. Obviously, this needs a lot of explanation. What exactly is he talking about? And hopefully we'll get to it, because the Tzemach Tzedek explains it in length. So this is all from the sunlight. But the sunlight itself, it doesn't change. There's no change in the sunlight because something grows. The same way, Hinei Shem Havaya Makol Kol Hitavut Olamot. The name Havaya, as we say, is unchanging, and it's the source of all creation. אבל משם הוויה עצמו לא היה אפשר להשתלשלות עולמות בעלי גבול. והיה הכל בבחינת ביטול. But if it would have been Havaya, like we saw last week, without the sheath, without the name Elokim, that would have created the world, there would be no sense of separateness. Everything would just be one with Hashem, and there could be no bittul because of that. There could be no act of self-nullification. There could be no choice to cancel the separateness. So therefore, and obviously he doesn't change. He wouldn't change for it. Everything would be just the same. Meaning there would be no sense of a separate reality.
By the way, why is it only Tvu'ah that grows from the sun directly?
What do you mean? Tvuot is a general word for produce.
Yeah, but why don't the animals and the humans grow from photosynthesis? Why only
So we talked about that in the future humans will. V'aya aleu letrufa. It says that in the future, at least as a mashal, I don't know, vitamin D, which is not a vitamin, it's really a cortisol. It's a type of hormone. Right? So it's synthesized in the body thanks to sunlight. So we already do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting that people, nobody said this about the corona yet. But let's say that vitamin D, or I don't remember what the name of the two hormones are. There's two of them. So let's say that really these hormones, they're important in what's the word? In balancing the immune system, and it's a big deal with corona. So nobody has said this yet. That this is what it says, Vaya aleu letrufa, that there will come a time when people will recognize this, that being in the sun is important. I mean, we have this thing. I grew up, don't be in the sun, because the sun's too strong. But it turns out that you have to be a certain amount of time. There's shemesh umarpe tzedakah biknafeh. Shemesh u'tzedakah marpe biknafeh. I think I can't remember which way the verse is, but it means that there's healing in the sun. So in that sense, we're all photoautotropic. We all have something. So will it come to the state where it becomes that you can actually energize yourself from it? That depends. It might be that we have a mechanism that we're not aware of that simply hasn't come to be used yet. But there might be something like that. We don't know. And by the way, it's not only from the sun. It also says that from the moon there's also something like that.
Yeah, cucumbers go from the moon.
Huh?
Cucumbers.
Yeah, there's all kinds of statements in the Talmud that they need moonlight. How is it different? I have no idea. Really what it means is that they're not talking about agriculture. What they're saying is there's things that you receive from the Malchus that you can't receive from the Zah. That's really what they're saying. Because I doubt they were saying anything about... I mean, there might be something like it, but I doubt that that's what interested them. Okay. So the letters of Elokim, they create the possibility of separateness. Now, it's very important to understand what this separateness means. People think that the world exists in and of itself. Really what it's saying is everything you see here is godliness. And the fact that you see it as not godliness, that's the Chiddush of Elokim. The fact that we experience ourselves as somehow not part of the Almighty is because of Elokim, because Hashem wanted to conceal the fact. But if it wasn't concealed, so what kind of world is it? It's the same world. Nothing is going to be different. It's the same, and Hashem is doing things. It's a very... I'm almost afraid to say it, but it's a very Spinozian concept of pantheism, that everything is godliness. What's wrong with Spinoza then? Why was he excommunicated? Ken, so why was Spinoza excommunicated? Something like that. Okay, like being taken out of the fold. I don't know. Whatever. You tell a horse you're no longer a horse. It doesn't mean anything. Tell a Jew he's no longer a Jew. It doesn't mean anything. But Spinoza didn't bring... He had other problems also, but as far as his pantheism, he didn't bring the other side of the equation, which is that you can't say that anything is God. He said everything, God is everything, but he couldn't make the separation and say, but you can't bow down to something because it's not God. Because there's still a difference. It's all godly, but it's not God. It's not the same thing exactly. Again, it's a very delicate subject to discuss and to define properly. A lot of what the opposition to the Baal Shem Tov was exactly for the same reason that Spinoza was opposed, because, like you said, he said the same thing. he said it right. He used the right intonation. And you could see that it wasn't causing him, like Spinoza, to become cosmopolitan, and it wasn't causing him to give up even a comma from the Shulchan Aruch. On the contrary, it made him even more careful with the mitzvos. On the contrary, it raised the value of the mitzvos. So you knew that even if you're not chapping the difference, there's a difference here. Because everybody who's following the Baal Shem Tov becomes more careful in their performance of mitzvos. So they must be getting that this is not the same thing. What exactly the difference is, so there's been all kinds of attempts in the academic world to write the difference out. In the end, I think they fail. The difference is really, in the end, in the total view. It's not this point or that point. You see the difference in the end in how the people conduct themselves.
Simple.
Yeah.
You go into the garden in peace, you come out the garden in peace.
Okay. There you go. That's one way of saying it. So the letters of Elokim, they create the possibility of there being what we see as plurality, as many things, as and all this is of course related to the rainbow, which took the simple light and it turned it into many different types of light, many different colors. ולכן על ידי אותיות השם אלוקים הם כלים להגביל האור השם שיוכל להתהוות העולמות נבראים בעלי גבול על ידי צירוף אותיות השם אלוקים. והנה בריבוי השתלשלות מ-120 צירופי לשם אלוקים. Since Elokim has 5 letters, you can make 5 factorial combinations of the letters. Right? So 5 factorial is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, which is 120. So you can make 120 different combinations of letters. And these combinations, נעשה מזה למטה, העלם והסתר גמור, החושך יכסה ארץ. So these create an actual, so now the question is this an actual type of darkness, or is it just a lack of light? What does the name Elokim do? Does it actually create darkness, or does it just prevent light from penetrating? Here he's not explicit. We can think about it. And about this concealment, it says, Ve'ed ya'aleh min ha'aretz, she'anan hu koach al hatshuva. So here he repeats this, that here, I was mistaken before. Here he still means that the water, somebody wrote me the word yesterday, and I forgot it again. That evaporates from the ocean and goes up. It creates clouds. But these clouds, he's saying, they're the result of the name Elokim. They're the result of the separation, so that there's darkness cast upon the earth. And the darkness allows there to be plurality. There allows there to be a separateness. So he says, the name Elokim is the reflected light, really. And the reflected light is also the reflected waters, let's call it, that's rising up.
But we decided that darkness is something on its own. It's not the lack of light.
It's both things.
It's a creation.
No, it's both things. Darkness is both something that's a noun in and of itself, and it's also a lack of light. And there's actually, over Shabbos...
Maybe light is a lack of darkness.
Could be. If darkness is something real, then there's also a light that's maybe... Yeah, in any case, that's called the Tona O Mina Choshech, the light that comes out of darkness. Over Shabbos, there's the Sicha that the Rebbe discusses this is in Chelek Yud, in the 10th part of Likutei Sichos, the second Sicha of Bereshis. He has a very long discussion of it there, and a very long footnote on the whole. And then in the addendums, they brought a letter from him doesn't say from when, it's probably in the teens. It was like, so meaning it was 1950s, or 1960s, maybe at the latest, that he brings all the citations for darkness being both something separate and being just a lack of light. And he didn't bring one citation that I remember, but I don't remember where it is. but I remember that I read it once, that this was a big machlokas, it was a big dispute between the Alter Rebbe and the other Talmidim of the Maggid. That the Alter Rebbe held that...
You said that once before.
Yeah, but he didn't bring that. I was surprised, because I thought that was a very important point, but I guess he didn't want to make it into a big deal. And then in the Sikha itself, which we now have in Toras Menachem, the Rebbe talked about it a lot more. He brought a beautiful story from the Tzemach Tzedek about this topic. And it develops into a whole question of the soul in the body. There's places where it's lighting the darkness, and there's places where it's just lighting the lack of light. And this is a whole topic in and of itself in Chassidus, that the mind is different than the heart in that respect. That in certain circumstances, the mind is just a lack of light. And okay, so it's a whole time. I haven't learned the mimer that he sent us to yet. In any case, so all this has to do with the cloud being the possibility of tshuva. Why? Because if there's darkness, if you can feel separate, then you also have to do tshuva. Yeah, that's what nullification is, not to feel separate. How do you stop being separate? The first thing is you attribute all the good things you did to Hashem. That's the beginning of not feeling separate. That if I'm able to say at the end of every good thing that I do, I didn't do this. This is Hashem doing it.
That's bittul, no?
That's bittul. That's nullification. That's the beginning of tshuva. And then you also have to do tshuva about the things that you did, which are all the bad things. But yeah, you should start out with tshuva with the good things. And tshuva with the good things is, don't attribute it to yourself. Attribute it to understand that this is all godliness, and what you did, this is what God did actually. Okay, and that's called ve'edi aleh min haaretz. That's the natural cycle of creating clouds made out of the evaporation of the waters below. And that's why the clouds allow you to do tshuva, because they represent the separation, they represent the state of being in darkness. V'hainu alidei itbonenut. How do you do this? How do you do tshuva here? Ech she'havaya hu Elokim. By understanding that everything you see here is separate, is really godliness. Sha'yester v'ha'elem hu rak lanu. It's only we who see the separation and the concealment.
It's our problem.
Good. It's not like that really. Umagbilim b'chdei sheyochal liyot nifradim. In order so that we can do tshuva. Because the whole purpose of the world was to do tshuva, to come back to Havaya, to come back to godliness. But really there was no change in the light. It's still all the same. There was no change. You were holy before the world was created, and you were holy after. I'm the first and I'm the last. And through this we get the power, through the cloud, we got the power to do tshuva. And this is why the Zohar says, says the Zohar, my rainbow. What is my rainbow? 3 colors. The Zohar says that the rainbow is made out of 3 colors. They didn't see a rainbow in their lives. What are you talking about? Obviously they're not talking about the physical rainbow. What are they talking about? They're talking about a rainbow as the result of tshuva. Now we're already getting into the fact that the cloud is not just the possibility of there being tshuva, but there's a cloud, a different type of cloud, that allows for the rainbow, meaning allows for Hashem's light to come in, as opposed to the other cloud which completely separates it, completely encloses it, completely sheaths it. I can't say these words. Covers it from our vision. So the cloud is tshuva. Here we see the rainbow, and it has 3 colors. Why 3 colors? There are 3 levels of tshuva. That's why the Zohar says there are 3 colors. It doesn't mean that they're physically 3 colors. It's talking about 3 levels of tshuva. See? דהיינו, שעל ידי התשובה נמשך מידת האהבה לאלוקות, ויש על ידי התשובה נמשך מידת היראה מהשם. So the lowest type of tshuva, according to this is not in the right order though. is that tshuva causes you to love God. There's tshuva that causes you to fear God. ועוד ממשיך בחינת רחמים רבים. כמו שכתוב ברחמי רבים. And the third level of tshuva, again, not necessarily in order, is that a person feels that God is compassionate. Okay, so we'll finish the Gemara, and then hopefully on Friday we'll see the Tzemach Tzedek.
Friday is Pidyon Aventa.
After the Pidyon. Or we'll learn it during Pidyon. What will they have? Orator is the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimarim. And here on Taf Reish Mem Chet, he has a very long exposition on this Maimer. And this is where he gets into the Malachim, which is a very, very interesting thing, and it has to do with agriculture. And it's a beautiful... Shkoyach.